These are the stories making the headlines at this hour. North Korea fired artillery shells near the maritime border for the third consecutive day over the weekend. The sister of North's leader Kim Yo-jong claimed Saturday's firing was a false operation to deceive the South, shaming Seoul's detection capabilities. South Korea dismisses the claims as nonsense. The latest report by South Korea's state-run think tank shows the country's economy is recovering as chip exports pick up along with strong auto exports. But domestic spending and investment remain sluggish amid high interest rates. Israel says it has destroyed Hamas's command in Northern Gaza. Tensions also rise on the Israel-Lebanon border as Hezbollah fires missiles toward Israel in response to last week's drone attack in Beirut. Good afternoon. We start with North Korea's third consecutive day of artillery shelling near the maritime border. The sister of North's leader Kim Yo-jong claims Saturday's firing was a false operation to deceive the South, shaming Seoul's detection capabilities. South Korea dismissed the claims as nonsense. Choi Min-jung has the latest.
Tensions on the inter-Korean maritime border are rising as North Korea on Sunday fired artillery shells into waters off its western coast for the third consecutive day. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff detected around 90 artillery shots on Sunday afternoon. The regime fired over 200 shells on Friday and 60 on Saturday, which landed in the maritime buffer zone above the northern limit line. However, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong, in an attempt to shame the South Korean military's detection capabilities, claimed the North conducted a, quote, deceptive operation on Saturday. She said the North had not actually fired 60 artillery shells, but instead detonated explosives simulating the sound of artillery fire. Shortly after, the regime's Korean People's Army reiterated Kim's claim. However, Seoul's JCS immediately dismissed the statement, calling it a, quote, comedy-like propaganda that is once again attempting to damage trust in the military and cause conflict within the South. The South Korean military added that Kim Yo-jong announced a, quote, false statement as she was surprised by the South's detection capabilities. North Korea has been intensifying its threats on the maritime border despite the South's repeated warnings to halt the provocations. Tensions between the two Koreas have escalated after the regime terminated the September 19th inter-Korean military agreement last November, following South Korea's partial suspension of the pact in protest of the regime's spy satellite launch. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The latest report by South Korea's state-run think tank shows the country's economy is recovering as chip exports pick up along with strong auto exports. But domestic spending and investment remain sluggish amid high interest rates. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
South Korea's economy is showing signs of improvement. That's according to the Korea Development Institute in a report released by the economic think tank on Monday. The slowdown in the economy is easing as the semiconductor industry recovers. Industrial production in November surged by 5.3% on year, largely driven by the increase in chip production. Chip production saw a sharp rise of more than 42% from the previous year on increased demand for AI servers. A rise in chip demand also contributed to a rise in overall exports, which were up 7.7% in November compared to the previous year. Exports overall in December were up 5.1% compared to the year before, and while that gain wasn't quite as big as in November, the increase was larger when adjusted for the number of working days. Chip exports rose by some 21% on year last month. And car exports were up nearly 18%, mainly on the back of increased demand for eco-friendly cars. But the economy still faces headwinds as consumption and investment remain sluggish due to ongoing high interest rates. Retail sales continue to show an on-year decline in November of 0.3%, and while this was a smaller decline than the previous month, this was mostly due to the base effect and temporary auto sales. And equipment investment in November dropped even further from the previous month to around 12% on year. In terms of the global economy, the KDI stated that growth is gradually slowing as production and consumption remain sluggish amid high interest rates. Over in the United States, while there was a rise in both consumption and investment, it is expected that the U.S. will see a gradual slowdown due to reduced government spending and monetary tightening. In China, the real estate market continues to see a dip in home prices despite economic stimulus policies, raising the possibility of slower growth. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea's overseas construction orders last year exceeded its target of $30 billion, jumping 25% on year on strong demand in the Middle East. The country has set its goal for 2024 even higher. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
South Korea's overseas plant orders last year surpassed the goal of $30 billion with a boom in orders from the Middle East. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced on Monday that the total came to $30.23 billion, up 25% compared to the year before. It's also the highest sum recorded since 2015, and it was a $1.5 billion contract to build a floating LNG vessel in Canada at the end of last year that tipped the total over the target for 2023. The ministry attributed the success to effective sales diplomacy in the Middle East, particularly the two summits between South Korea and Saudi Arabia held in November 2022 and October last year, which resulted in large-scale plant construction orders. The boom in the Middle East was reflected in the data. More than a third of all overseas plant orders last year were from the Middle East. The largest overseas order recorded last year was also from Riyadh, with Hyundai Engineering and Construction's $5 billion agreement to build a mega petrochemical plant for its state oil company. This is also the most expensive contract won by any South Korean company so far in Saudi Arabia. The United States came in a close second in terms of the percentage of overseas orders, as South Korean companies responded to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act by localizing the production of electric vehicle parts. An increase in exports of equipment such as semiconductors, batteries and display screens to the U.S. also contributed to the country's overseas orders meeting its target. This year, the government's goal for overseas construction orders is higher than last year's at $40 billion. It will be offering tailored support for companies during each stage of the contracting process to keep riding the Middle East boom. The country's Deputy Trade Secretary said the ministry would do its best to strengthen exports growth, especially with increasing demand in new industries such as decarbonization. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Exports of South Korean instant noodles, ramyeon, hit a record high last year, exceeding more than 1 trillion won. Data from the Korea Customs Service shows ramyeon exports reached $952 million in 2023, up 24% on year. It was the 9th consecutive year of increase in ramyeon exports. Ramyeon, which saw its 60th anniversary last year, has gained popularity as Korean culture has boomed through K-pop and other K-content. The industry expects that the demand will continue throughout 2024. Israel says it has destroyed Hamas's command in Northern Gaza. Tensions also rise on the Israel-Lebanon border as Hezbollah fires missiles toward Israel in response to last week's drone attack in Beirut. Lee Sing-jae has more.
The Israeli military said Sunday that it has destroyed Hamas command in northern Gaza, adding that the army has killed at least 8,000 militants in the area. According to Israel Defense Forces spokesperson Daniel Hagari, Hamas is now operating in the area only sporadically and without commanders. He added that they are now focusing on dismantling the militant group in southern and central Gaza. Despite visits by diplomatic leaders from the U.S. and the EU, tensions in the Middle East continue to rise, with reciprocal attacks between Israel and Lebanon's pro-Iran armed faction Hezbollah. According to Reuters and CNN, Hezbollah announced that it fired 62 missiles at Mount Meron Air Base in northern Israel on Saturday, which it called a response to the assassination of senior Hamas leader in Beirut last week. The Israeli military said Sunday that it responded to the attacks by deploying fighter jets to bomb Hezbollah facilities in southern Lebanon. U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken and High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Joseph Borrell made trips to the Middle East as they tried to quell the tensions in the region. Meanwhile, the Qatari Prime Minister says the assassination of a high-ranking Hamas official, Saleh al-Aruri, in Beirut last week affected efforts to mediate a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. However, the Prime Minister vowed to continue mediation efforts. Hamas halted all ceasefire and hostage release negotiations with Israel after the death of its senior leader. A number of Hamas officials, including al-Aruri, were killed in a drone attack in Beirut. U.S. officials have pointed to Israel for conducting the attack. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Russia plans to conduct a total of 7 intercontinental ballistic missile tests this year. Sputnik News reported the announcement by the Russian Ministry of Defense, which also revealed that the strategic missile forces have conducted over 20 ICBM launches in the past 5 years. Since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Russia has occasionally hinted at possibly using nuclear weapons and has conducted large-scale nuclear exercises involving the deployment of ICBMs. Now over in Japan, the death toll from the devastating earthquake in Ishikawa Prefecture last week has risen to 128 on Sunday. Some 560 others are reported injured, while 195 residents of the prefecture are still unaccounted for. A woman in her 90s was rescued from under the rubble in Suju City on Saturday, 124 hours after the initial earthquake. According to authorities, it is very rare for people to be rescued alive beyond 72 hours after the quake, as the chance of survival in a disaster is said to drop significantly after the first 3 days. The U.S. has suspended the operation of Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes after a section of one such plane blew out in midair. Countries including South Korea are also conducting safety inspections. Boeing's flagship model has long been involved in safety controversies. Shin-Young reports.
Travel plans for thousands of passengers in the U.S. are in disarray after regulators grounded almost 200 Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircrafts following an incident on an Alaska Airlines flight bound for Ontario, California, which resulted in an emergency landing. According to Reuters, shortly after taking off from Portland, a door panel on a Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft blew out at an altitude of around 16,000 feet, resulting in a sudden drop in cabin pressure. There were no fatalities, but some injuries were reported.
And it wasn't like any other turbulence just because the masks had came down too. So that's when I knew, like, oh gosh, this is something way different. And yeah, I started freaking out.
The U.S. aviation regulator ordered that 171 Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes be grounded and checked. Alaska Airlines immediately suspended the operation of its 65 Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft.
At this stage of an investigation, everything's in. We go very broad. Nothing's excluded.
And it's not only the U.S. The EU's Aviation Safety Agency has also ordered safety inspections. Meanwhile, Seoul's Transport Ministry on Sunday told South Korean Airlines to conduct safety checks on Boeing 737 MAX planes as a preemptive safety measure. Boeing's flagship model, the 737 MAX, has been involved in 2 major crashes in the past 5 years. In October 2018, a 737 MAX jet flown by Indonesia's Lion Air crashed, killing all 189 on board. In March 2019, an Ethiopian Airlines flight crashed, resulting in the death of all 157 passengers. Shin-Young, Arirang News.
South Korea-born actor Steven Yeun has won his first Golden Globe for his role in Beef. At the annual award ceremony in Beverly Hills on Sunday local time, the 40-year-old actor picked up the Best Performance by a Male Actor in a limited series anthology series or a motion picture made for television for his role in Netflix comedy drama Beef. Yeun stars as Danny Cho, a failing building contractor who becomes involved in a dispute with a stranger following a road rage incident. He becomes the first Asian American man to win this category. His Beef co-star Ellie Wong also won a Golden Globe in the female category. Now on the cultural front back here at home, what does the K-culture scene have to offer this year? Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin might have answered to that.
As we step into 2024, here's a sneak peek of what the culture scene has in store. If you thought 2023 was a treat for streamers, brace yourself for an even more exciting lineup ahead. A bunch of blockbuster sequels are in store. Netflix is set to drop the second season of the Emmy Award-winning Squid Game in the latter half of the year. If you're into real-life survival challenges, get ready for Physical 100 Season 2, which last year topped the platform's non-English show chart. And don't forget Apple TV's breakout hit Pachinko, the winner of Best Foreign Language Series at the 2023 Critics' Choice Awards. The small screen is also making room for big screen titans. Cannes-winning filmmaker Park Chan-wook is collaborating with Netflix for the first time with a period thriller called War and Revolt. Another Cannes winner, actor Song Kang-ho, is making his drama debut with Disney Plus's Uncle Samsik. The silver screen is gearing up for a comeback after a lower-than-expected performance last year.
Last year, the success of 12/12 The Day signaled a comeback for moviegoers in theaters. We're looking at a bunch of titles lined up to premiere this year, more than what we had in 2023. Quite a lot of films had their premieres pushed back because of COVID-19.
The highlight? The sequel to the crime thriller Veteran is set to premiere at the year-end. Part 1 from 2015 sold over 13 million tickets. While waiting for that, film enthusiasts can enjoy Parasite director Bong Joon-ho's latest creation, Mickey 17, in March, and the fourth installment of the Roundup series in May. In the world of K-pop, get ready for K-pop-style groups.
Before, the strategy was to include one or two non-Korean members in each group to appeal to the global market. The trend now is creating K-pop-style groups tailored to the culture and preferences of the local audience, sometimes without any Korean members.
JYP Entertainment's global girl group Vicha is set to debut this month, while HYBE's Cat's Eye will drop their first album in the second quarter. And for all the BTS armies out there, the wait is almost over. Jin completes his military service in June, with J-Hope following suit in October. So get ready to immerse yourself in the world of K-culture in the year 2024. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Despite the increasing popularity of foldable smartphones, the visible creases on the screen's folding point remains an issue. But there's now wrinkle-free touch panels that can solve those problems. Jung Eun-ju reports.
Foldable smartphones can flexibly adjust to various sizes. While their overall performance has improved in recent years, the visible creases on the screen persist as a significant drawback. In response, South Korean researchers have developed touch panels that remain wrinkle-free even after repeated crumpling or folding. It consists of 3 layers, a shape memory polymer capable of adjusting flexibility from softness to firmness up to 700 times, combined with layers of silver nanowires and elastomer. The crumpled touch panel maintains rigid, but when a current is applied, the silver nanowires act as a heating element, softening the surface and making the wrinkles disappear. When heat was applied to a crumpled touch panel, the wrinkles vanished within a second. Touch performance was also maintained as the electrodes reconnected.
When the touch panel is crumpled, artificially applying heat softens the shape memory polymer, simultaneously eliminating the wrinkles.
The researchers developed the touch panel after being inspired by how a butterfly spreads its wings. The touch panel maintained its initial performance by over 95% and demonstrated durability in experiments involving folding and unfolding the panel more than 800 times.
After the butterfly's metamorphosis, its bodily fluids evaporate, gradually causing the wings to unfold. Our research team paid attention to this phenomenon.
The researchers are continuing further research to develop wrinkle-free displays by combining them with polymer-based luminescent components. The research results have been published in Nature Electronics, an international journal of electronic engineering. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. China has imposed sanctions on 5 American defense companies in response to U.S. arms sales to Taiwan and U.S. sanctions on Chinese individuals and companies. Chinese state media, CCTV, reported on Sunday that the sanctions would freeze any assets in China and ban firms or individuals in China from doing business with the defense companies. The 5 companies named are BAE Systems Land and Armament, Alien Tech Systems Operation, AeroVironment, Viasat, and Datalink Solutions. China warned last month that it would take countermeasures against companies involved in the $300 million defense deal with Taiwan approved by the US. The sanctions, seen as a largely symbolic move, come days before the Taiwanese presidential elections to be held on January 13. In Bangladesh, a fire at the country's biggest Rohingya refugee camp has left more than 8,000 without shelter. The head of Ukia fire station said that the fire began on Saturday night at Kutupalong camp in Cox's Bazar and spread fast, leaving about 1,040 shelters destroyed. Although the cause of the fire is yet unknown, Refugee Commissioner Mizanur Rahman on Sunday said there are suspicions of arson. Previously, a massive fire in the same camp in March 2021 killed at least 15 and destroyed over 10,000 shelters. Kutupalong refugee camp is currently the largest refugee camp in the world, with around 1 million Rohingya refugees. Rohingya Muslims have been flowing into Bangladesh since Myanmar's military crackdown in 2017. Eurozone inflation in December increased to 2.9% across the bloc, up from November's 2.4%. This is less than the 3% that financial experts had forecast, but it does mark the end of 7 months of decline. December's rise supports the European Central Bank's prediction that the headline inflation will average 2.7% this year. Currently, the European Bank has a record high interest rate of above 4%. ECB President Christine Lagarde has emphasized that no rate cuts were considered in December's meeting. The Palace of Aegae in northern Greece, where Alexander the Great was proclaimed king, fully reopened to the public on Friday after completing a 16-year restoration. The largest building of classical Greece, covering 15,000 square meters, was renovated in a more than $22 million project, partly funded by the European Union. The palace was originally built more than 2,300 years ago, during the reign of Alexander the Great's father, Philip II, where Aegae was the royal capital of Kingdom of Macedonia. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It was one freezing morning to start off the day. Lows were 5 to 8 degrees lower than yesterday, with a cold wave advisory issued in many inland areas. Seoul had a low of minus 10 degrees, feeling more like minus 15 degrees to start out. Even Busan saw sub-zero morning temperatures. Highs are not rising much today, so bundle up. The East Coast is under a dry weather advisory with strong winds, and fire safety should come first today. Sunny skies with good air quality are welcomed nationwide except on Jeju Island, where cloudy skies are in the forecast with a high of 7 degrees this afternoon. Seoul tops out at 0 degrees, feeling more like minus 2. There seems to be lingering snow and ice on the sidewalk, so please walk with extra care today. Then a mix of rain and snow is in the forecast for Tuesday, starting from the capital and west of central regions, gradually spreading nationwide over the course of the day. The cold snap will weaken after Tuesday's wintry precipitation. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
After 3 consecutive days of artillery shelling, North Korea claims Saturday's firing was a deceptive, false operation, which the South sees as completely groundless. It is a frequent tactic used by Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister. In 2022, she claimed Seoul wrongly confirmed the location of its cruise missile launch and refuted that its ICBM technology is an early stage as Seoul claims, all without giving any evidence. This time, the groundless claims come as the North is ramping up its recent two Koreas at war rhetoric, and Seoul sees it as an attempt to raise tensions ahead of the South's April general election, like the 2 rounds of provocations seen around previous elections too. This wraps up today's newscast. Thanks for watching.